36 cuts, 1 blind eye, 200 people too scared to even breathe. And the thing Harlem remembered most wasn't the screaming or the blood on the floor, it was a plate of spaghetti. The night Bumpy Johnson wiped his knife, straightened his tie, and sat down to eat, he didn't just win a fight, he rewrote the rules. Why did that meal outlive every stabbing in Harlem's underworld? Stick around, we're gonna pull that night apart, piece by piece. Summer of 1935. Harlem, New York. On a map, it's just another neighborhood in Manhattan. On the ground, it's a different country. The Great Depression is still squeezing the city. Tenements are packed, jobs are scarce, black families crowd into walk-up apartments, 6, 7 people to a room. By day, men line up on corners, hoping for work. By night, they line up for something else, a chance at the numbers. On paper, Harlem lives under the same laws as everyone else. There are courts, there are judges, there are policemen on the corners in pressed blue uniforms. But if you're black in 1935, you know there are really 2 sets of laws. There's the law in the books, and there's the law in the streets. The law in the books says everyone is equal. The law in the streets says some lives count more than others. A white shopkeeper gets robbed, the police show up fast. A black woman gets beaten, they might not show up at all. And if they do, they write a report, light a cigarette, and forget it by morning. A lot of those officers walk a second beat after dark. They collect envelopes from bootleggers, from brothels, from mob bosses downtown. They don't protect Harlem. They tax it. But Harlem still needs rules. Someone has to decide who pays, who plays, who gets punished. And when the law falls asleep, something else wakes up to fill the gap. That something else is the numbers racket. Every morning, maids, porters, waiters, elevator boys drop nickels and dimes into a dream. They bet on 3-digit numbers pulled from the day's racetrack figures or stock exchange totals. For most of Harlem, the numbers are more real than Wall Street. The bank might turn you away. The numbers man knows your name. At the top of that underground economy stands a woman, Madame Stephanie Street Claire. To the city, she's a crime boss. To Harlem, she's the numbers queen. She pays bail when the police sweep up the neighborhood. She sends envelopes to families when a father gets locked up. She hires men to make sure loan sharks, crooked landlords, and abusive shopkeepers don't go too far. One of those men is a sharp-dressed enforcer from South Carolina named Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. By 30, Bumpy has already earned a reputation as the most dangerous man in Harlem. He reads poetry. He plays chess. And if Madame Street Claire points at a problem, he knows how to make that problem disappear. That's how a black gangster becomes something different in Harlem. On one side, he is absolutely a criminal. He collects, he enforces, he spills blood. On the other side, he's a shield between his people and a world that doesn't care if they live or die. Outsiders look uptown and see the jungle. They talk about cleaning it up, taking it over, making it profitable. One of those outsiders is Dutch Schultz. Dutch is a German-Jewish mobster who already controls half of New York's underworld. Speakeasies, breweries, protection rackets, in the Bronx and downtown Manhattan, his tentacles are everywhere. But there's one stream of money he doesn't own yet, Harlem's numbers. He wants them all, every penny, every corner, every runner. To Dutch, Harlem is not a community. It's a spreadsheet. He doesn't see church ladies and shoeshine boys. He sees revenue. And he doesn't care how many black bodies he has to step over to get it. So you have 2 systems crashing toward each other. The official law, looking the other way while Dutch buys judges and cops. The street law, written in whispers by Madame Street Claire and enforced by Bumpy Johnson. If you live on Lenox Avenue that summer, you feel it in the air. The tension hums like a power line. You hear about Dutch's men slipping into Harlem and not making it back. You hear about Bumpy's people getting picked up and roughed up by cops who suddenly care a little too much, and you're stuck in the middle. Because if the state won't defend you, you reach for whoever will. Even if that whoever carries a gun and a knife. Even if tomorrow he might be the one bringing trouble to your block, Bumpy Johnson doesn't rise because Harlem loves violence. He rises because Harlem is tired of being prey. He is both the disease and the cure. A man created by a broken system, now standing between his neighborhood and a mob boss who thinks Harlem is for sale. And Dutch Schultz is about to find out what happens when you try to bring your law into a place that already has its own. Dutch Schultz is not used to hearing the word no. By 1935, he controls half of New York's underworld. Speakeasies in the Bronx, breweries in Jersey, bookmakers downtown. If there is money being made in the shadows, there is a good chance Dutch is wetting his beak. From his office, Harlem is just another piece of real estate. 3 miles of streets, thousands of working people, and a river of cash running through the numbers racket. To him, it isn't a neighborhood, it's a pie, and he wants every slice. He sends collectors, he sends muscle, he sends offers that sound a lot like threats, but Harlem is stubborn. The runners don't flip, the bankers don't sell. Every time his men push too far uptown, they either come back bruised or don't come back at all. Down in the Bronx, Dutch blames one name for all of it: Bumpy Johnson. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson is only 30, but in Harlem, that's already a long career. He grew up on the streets of Charleston, South Carolina, fighting his way through a world that didn't expect a black boy to live long enough to get old. He reads poetry. He quotes lines from Langston Hughes. And when Madame Stephanie Street Claire tells him someone is hurting Harlem, he picks up his hat, smooths his suit, and goes to fix it. He works for the numbers queen, and everyone knows it. Madame Street Claire built an empire out of pennies and dreams. Bumpy is the blade and the brain that keeps that empire standing. In back rooms and barbershops, people repeat the same line about him in different ways. Harlem stays Harlem. Harlem stays black. Whatever words they use, the meaning is simple. This neighborhood doesn't belong to downtown. Bumpy is not a national figure. He isn't on the front page. But inside this grid of streets, he is the man you don't cross. He's the closest thing Harlem has to a godfather, not of America, just of this one crowded, electric patch of Manhattan. And he doesn't rule it alone. The strength behind his name is a network you don't see on a police map. Shoeshine boys on the corners. Newsstand kids who handle every paper that passes through Harlem. Women selling flowers, candy, cigarettes by the subway exits. They watch. They listen. They notice when a strange face shows up in the wrong suit, on the wrong block, at the wrong hour. And at the end of the day, those details drift back to Bumpy like notes pinned to a board. Meanwhile, in the Bronx, Dutch is counting bodies. He has already lost dozens of men trying to bully his way into Harlem's numbers. Every loss is money gone, respect gone. Another joke told, at his expense in smoky rooms he used to dominate. So he makes a decision. If Harlem won't bend to fear, he will import fear from somewhere else. That's when he calls Chicago. Chicago sends him a name: Ulysses Rollins. 6'2", 240 pounds. 11 men dead before his 25th birthday. They call him the Bull because once he lowers his head and charges, he doesn't stop until something breaks. Dutch lays out the deal: $5,000 up front, $10,000 more when Bumpy Johnson is gone, and one condition that matters more than the money: make it loud, make it public. I want every numbers runner in Harlem to see what happens when they say no. Rollins gets on a train. He steps off in New York, already imagining the headlines. To him, Harlem is just another hunting ground. Another job, another body on the floor. What he doesn't understand is that Harlem is already watching him. By Friday morning, Bumpy knows there's a 6'2", 240-pound hitter from Chicago staying in a certain hotel. He knows what room the man is in. He knows Rollins eats a heavy breakfast, carries a 45 inches a shoulder holster, and keeps a knife in his boot. But here's the part most people miss. When that information reaches Bumpy, it doesn't come as random gossip. In his mind, the neighborhood lights up like a map. That hotel on 7th Avenue? He knows the bellhop's cousin. The diner, where Rollins orders steak and eggs? The waitress has a brother who runs numbers for Madame Street Claire. The street outside? 3 different shoeshine stands that owe Bumpy favors. Every face is a point on that map. Every point is a line of sight. Bumpy understands a simple rule of street warfare. If you want to disappear a man, you pull him into the shadows. If you want to send a message, you meet him in the brightest room you can find. Rollins is coming to Harlem to make a statement for Dutch Schultz. Bumpy is already thinking about how to turn that statement around and send it back. So, while the bull from Chicago walks into a city he thinks is blind, Bumpy Johnson is already arranging the pieces, waiting for the perfect moment to show Dutch exactly who really writes the laws on these blocks. While Dutch Schultz is wiring money to Chicago, someone very different is walking into Harlem for the first time. Her name is Helen Lawson, Vassar graduate, editor and film critic for Vanity Fair. 20-something, sharp eyes, notebook always in her bag. She does not come to Harlem looking for a gangster. She comes looking for a story. That summer of 1935, her editor wants a piece on the Harlem Renaissance, jazz, poetry, painting, the way black artists are changing New York from the inside out. So one Friday night, Helen steps into a Harlem jazz club. Cigarette smoke hangs low over the room. Trumpet cuts through the noise. Every table is full of black faces laughing, drinking, arguing about music and politics. There is a beat of silence when a white woman in a neat dress walks in alone. Then the room exhales, and the music swallows her up. She doesn't sit in the back. She walks right up to the bar, orders a drink, and starts asking questions. Not, is it dangerous here? Not, where are the gangsters? She asks about Langston Hughes, about a new play that just opened on 135th Street, about what Harlem wants the rest of New York to understand. In a corner booth, a man in a dark suit watches her. Broad shoulders, clean hat, calm eyes that miss nothing. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson has seen reporters before. Usually they stare, scribble something about crime, and run back downtown. Helen is different. She seems more interested in the piano player than in the gun on the bouncer's hip. When they finally speak, there is no mention of bodies or bullets. She asks him what he reads. He quotes a line of poetry. She recognizes the name. He is amused. For 3 weeks, they orbit each other like that. Clubs, late-night conversations. He sends a drink to her table. She sends over a note with a question about a poem. To the people watching, it looks impossible. A black enforcer from Harlem and a white magazine editor from downtown. But inside the bubble of jazz and cigarette smoke, their worlds briefly overlap. So when Bumpy asks her to dinner at the Alhambra Bar and Theater, she says yes. The Alhambra sits on the corner of 126th Street and 7th Avenue. On that night, it looks like a postcard of black Manhattan. Men in pressed suits and shining shoes, women in silk dresses, perfume mixing with the smell of red sauce and garlic, a live band in the corner, playing something smooth enough that people talk over it instead of shouting. Helen sits across from Bumpy at a small table, white tablecloth, 2 glasses. The kind of place where you talk about movies, not murder. He tells her about Charleston, about growing up in the South, about train tracks and cotton fields, and the first time he saw New York. He talks about words, about how a poem can hit harder than a fist when it lands in the right mind. She tells him what it's like to be one of 3 women in a New York newsroom. Men who call her kid, but steal her ideas. Directors who invite her to screenings and then forget her name when the room is full. She laughs it off, but there is steel under the jokes. Around them, the room hums. Waiters weave between tables. Glasses clink. Someone at the bar is telling a story that ends in loud, rolling laughter. From the outside, they look like any other couple on a summer night in Harlem. A man in a good suit, a woman in a city dress, talking about art, about work, about wanting more than the box the world has put them in. Helen doesn't know his full ledger. She knows he is dangerous. People whisper when he walks past, but she also knows the man who stands up when an older woman needs a seat. The man who quotes poets by heart and listens when she talks about film. In this story, Helen is not the damsel. She is the eye, the moral lens the audience can look through. She feels the pull of his charm and the weight of his violence at the same time. In a few minutes, that tension will snap. The jazz will stop. Two worlds, hers and his, will collide on the same restaurant floor. Right now, though, there is only the low music, the clink of cutlery, and a woman who has no idea that tonight she is about to watch a man step out of legend and into nightmare. 8:47 p.m., summer of 1935, the Alhambra Bar and Theater is full. Every chair taken, every table crowded, band in the corner, soft jazz bleeding into the clink of knives and glasses. Helen is mid-sentence when the front door opens. She doesn't stop talking, but Bumpy does. His eyes flick up, just once, not at the noise. At the shape, a tall man fills the doorway. 6'2", 240 pounds, dark suit that doesn't quite fit the New York room. Shoulders forward, chin tucked, eyes scanning like he has walked into hostile territory 100 times before. Ulysses Rollins, the bull from Chicago. From Bumpy's angle, it's all data. Gait, stance, hands, the bulge under the coat that isn't a wallet. From Helen's angle, it's just a man who changes the air. She feels it before she understands it. The music suddenly sounds too loud. Then, somehow, not loud enough. Rollins doesn't look at the band, doesn't look at the bar. He walks straight down the middle aisle like he owns it, like the 200 people pressed around him are furniture. He already knows who he is here for. Dutch Schultz made sure of that. $5,000 wired ahead of time. $10,000 when the job is done. One instruction that keeps echoing in his head as he moves through the tables. Make it loud. Make it public. He stops 3 steps from Bumpy's table. The band stutters, then keeps playing. No one wants to be the first to admit they're afraid. Bumpy's chair is turned just enough to face him. He doesn't get up. He doesn't hide. Helen looks between the two men and feels the temperature in her body drop. Rollins tilts his head like he's checking a photograph against the real thing. Ellsworth Johnson, he says, Chicago in his voice, flat, businesslike. I came a long way to solve a problem. Bumpy looks at him for a beat that feels longer than it is. What kind of problem? He asks. The kind that walks, Rollins says. The kind that breathes. Dutch sends his regards. There is a small ripple around them. People are not stupid. They hear Dutch. They see Rollins' size. They see Bumpy's calm. In a different city, this is where the room empties. In Harlem, people freeze. Because if they move, they might get noticed. If they stay very still, maybe the storm passes over them. Helen finally understands. This is not a bad date. This is an execution with linen napkins. Bumpy lowers his eyes for a second, as if glancing at the table. In reality, he is checking angles. Distance to Rollins, distance to Helen, distance to the nearest family with kids sitting 2 tables over. He can see the outline of the gun under Rollins' coat now. If that gun comes out, it won't just be aimed at him. In a crowded restaurant, bullets never have just one name on them. To everyone else, it looks like Bumpy size. To Rollins, it looks like fear. He takes half a step closer. Dutch thinks Harlem is open ground, Rollins says. He thinks your 8 blocks belong to him now. There it is. 8 blocks. That's how far some people think Bumpy's world reaches. Bumpy finally pushes his chair back and stands. Slow. No rush. No big movements to spook anyone. The way I heard it, he says quietly, Harlem takes care of itself. His right hand is empty. His left hand rests near the steak knife on the table. Rollins' right hand hangs close to his coat, fingers ready to dip inside. Two different versions of power, standing an arm's length apart. If Rollins gets there first, this room becomes a slaughterhouse. If Bumpy moves first, it stays a story. For one heartbeat, no one breathes. Rollins goes for the gun. He doesn't clear the holster. The first cut lands on his forearm. Sharp, fast, more shock than pain. The second and third follow before his brain can process the first. Wrist, bichep. The right arm goes heavy and useless, coat darkening. By the 12th cut, the gun hand is finished. Tendons sliced. Blood on the white tablecloth, on the polished floor, sprayed across someone's empty plate. People scream, but they don't move. Chairs scrape, then freeze. The band stops mid-note. Bumpy is close now, almost chest to chest. His knife draws short, nasty lines across meat and fabric. Side, shoulder, cheek. Every movement, small, controlled, like he is writing something only Rollins can read. He is not swinging wildly. He is doing math. Rollins swings his left hand, tries to grab, to crush, to drag Bumpy down with him. A big man drowning in his own weight. Cuts 15 through 24, climb higher. Jaw, ear, brow. Then one deliberate thrust turns the world black on one side. Rollins' right eye goes out. Light's gone forever. The sound he makes is not tough. It is animal. High and ripped and full of surprise. Somebody drops a glass. It shatters, and no one even looks. By the time Bumpy reaches cut 30, Rollins is already halfway down, knees buckling, back sliding against a table leg. Napkins and silverware crash to the floor with him. There is still breath in his chest. Still fight somewhere under the pain. Bumpy takes that into account. 31, 32, 33. Short, efficient cuts that keep him from standing up again. By cut 36, Ulysses Rollins is no longer a threat. He is a giant of a man, leaking onto the tiles, one eye gone, the other staring up at the ceiling he won't remember. 200 people are in that room. No one speaks. No jazz. No clatter. Just the soft wheeze of Rollins trying to pull air through ruined lungs, and the ringing in everyone's ears. For a long moment, Bumpy stands over him, breathing hard but steady. Knife in his hand. Blood on his cuffs. Then, slowly, he straightens his tie. Somewhere in the back, a waiter drops a tray. No one even turns around. Alhambra is frozen in place, like a photograph taken 1 second after lightning hits. For a few seconds after the last cut, no one moves. Rollins is on the floor, one eye gone, suit torn open, blood soaking into the tiles. 200 people are locked in place, caught between their chairs and the exits. The band is frozen mid-song, horn halfway to the player's mouth. Bumpy stands over the body, chest rising and falling, knife still in his hand. Then he does something that breaks the spell. He walks over to the nearest empty table, takes a clean napkin, and wipes the blade once. Slow, careful. He sets the knife down, straightens his tie like he's getting ready for a photograph, and steps over Rollins' body the way you might step over a puddle in the street. He doesn't look down. He turns back to his table, pulls out his chair, and sits. Helen is still there, hands clenched in her lap. Her legs feel hollow. Her throat is so tight she can barely swallow. Bumpy sits across from her like they paused a normal dinner. He nods to the waiter. "Menu," he says, voice steady, almost bored. It takes a second for the waiter to understand he's being spoken to. When he does, he hurries over, eyes flicking between Bumpy's clean tie and the man dying on the floor behind him. Bumpy doesn't turn around. "I'll have the spaghetti and meatballs," he says. "Extra sauce." The words sound insane in that room. Somewhere near the door, a woman starts crying quietly. Someone else whispers a prayer. Chairs creak as people try to make themselves smaller without drawing attention. The kitchen keeps working because no one has told them to stop. Plates still come up in the window. Orders still get called. 7 minutes later, a plate lands gently in front of Bumpy. Steam rises. Red sauce, white pasta, a neat stack of meatballs. He thanks the waiter like nothing is wrong. He twirls the first forkful with the same hand that was holding the knife. He raises it, blows on it once, and starts to eat. Small bites. Slow chewing. No rush. Across from him, Helen's hands are shaking so badly her water glass rattles against the table. She can smell iron and tomato at the same time. Her stomach turns. The fork in front of her might as well weigh 50 pounds. She doesn't touch her food. Behind Bumpy, Rollins is still making those wet, broken sounds that don't match the way a man that big is supposed to sound. A few people try to look away and fail. The scene is too wrong to ignore, and that's exactly why it sticks. The human brain is not a perfect camera. It doesn't keep every frame, it keeps hooks. It keeps the thing that doesn't fit. 36 knife cuts in a Harlem restaurant is brutal, but it's not unique. In that world, men get shot, stabbed, beaten every week. Stories like that blur together. But a man who takes another man's eye and then sits down, smooths his tie, and eats spaghetti and meatballs while the ambulance is on its way, that's a broken note in the song. It's so off-key the brain can't let it go. Ask someone years later about that night, and they won't give you a police report. They won't list angles and wounds and positions. They'll say, he cut that man up and then he sat down and ate spaghetti. Right there, in front of everybody. Not 36 cuts. Not 200 witnesses. Just spaghetti. In psychology, people talk about how memories hang on anchors. One smell, one color, one ridiculous detail. In crime stories, it's the killer in the spotless white suit. In war stories, it's the soldier who pauses to straighten a painting on the wall. The small, calm action inside the chaos becomes the logo of the whole event. That's what Bumpy creates, whether he planned it that way or not. He doesn't scream. He doesn't stand on a chair and make a speech. He lets the room do the talking for him. 200 people watch him eat. Sauce on the fork. Meatball cut clean in half. Blood drying inches away. By the time he's worked his way through about half the plate, the sirens are close enough to rattle the windows. The ambulance doors will open on a dining room that looks almost normal: tables, chairs, plates, one man calmly finishing his meal, and a legend already forming in every whisper. Because in the end, Harlem won't pass this story down as the night Rollins got 36 cuts. They'll pass it down as the night Bumpy Johnson ate spaghetti over a dead man and told the whole city who really owned the room. By the time the ambulance finally pushes through the traffic and the police step into Alhambra, the spaghetti is already half gone. The room still smells like tomato sauce and fear. Musicians stand with their instruments at their sides. Couples sit stiff in their seats, coats still on their shoulders, eyes fixed anywhere but the body on the floor. 2 officers take one look at the scene and understand exactly where they are. Harlem. Summer of 1935. Bumpy Johnson's house. They move slow. They ask a few questions, but not too many. A shaken waiter stammers something about a man from out of town pulling a gun first. A woman near the bar nods so hard her hat nearly falls off. Nobody wants their name on any paper that goes back downtown. By the end of the night, the report will say a simple phrase: self-defense. Victim drew weapon first. On paper, it is just another late-night incident in a black neighborhood. In Harlem, everyone knows it is something else. By the next morning, the story spreads like smoke. On 135th Street, a barber tells it to a line of men waiting for a shave. On the corner by the church, a father breaks it down for his teenage son, lowering his voice at the part about the eye. In tiny kitchens 5 floors up, mothers pour coffee and tell their daughters, he didn't run, he sat and ate his food. Every version has the same detail: the spaghetti. Some call it crazy. Some call it courage. Some call it the coldest thing they have ever heard. But all of them agree on one sentence: Harlem protects its own. A few miles away, in a smoke-filled back room, Dutch Schultz gets the news delivered piece by piece. First, Rollins is down. Then, Rollins is not just down, he is finished. Cut up in front of a full house, one eye gone, 40 men over the last months dead or useless. The bull from Chicago walked into Harlem and never even got to use the horns. Dutch paces. He curses. He throws a glass against the wall. This was supposed to be loud. This was supposed to be public. Make an example, he told Rollins. Harlem got the message. It just was not his. Because now, everybody is repeating one line he did not write. Bumpy eats spaghetti while your killer bleeds out behind him. Somewhere between the rage and the broken glass, Dutch understands the truth. He can keep sending men into that neighborhood and watch them disappear. He can pay off more cops. He can make more speeches about ownership and territory. But Harlem has already decided. So when he finally reaches out to Lucky Luciano to ask for a sit-down, the words taste bitter in his mouth. They sound like this: "We leave Harlem alone." Harlem is not for sale. He is still dangerous. He is still rich. He still has half the underworld on his books. But one square on the board is closed. 6 months later, Dutch Schultz is the one bleeding out, shot to pieces in a Newark restaurant bathroom, taken off the board by men who play on a bigger level than neighborhood wars. This time, Bumpy is not the one holding the knife. He is the one getting the invitation. Because when the dust settles, the Italians do the math. Harlem is a gold mine. Harlem is also a trap for outsiders. If you want it to keep running quiet, you do not send in more Rollins. You sit down with the man who can walk through a storm, straighten his tie, and finish his dinner. So one night, Bumpy Johnson takes a car downtown. Different restaurant, different city. Same man. He walks into a room where nobody looks like him. Men who run docks, warehouses, judges, whole neighborhoods of New York sit at the table, and there, between the wine glasses and the ashtrays, they make an arrangement. They keep their hands in the money. He keeps his hands on Harlem. For the next 30 years, through prison sentences, through civil rights marches, through Malcolm X and Alcatraz and back again, his name will sit over that neighborhood like a weather report. If you live here, you live under Bumpy. And this is where the story shifts from knives and plates to something bigger. Because real power is not just what happens on that restaurant floor. Real power is what happens the next morning. Real power is the ability to make a whole city quietly agree on where the line is. It is control. It is restraint. It is deciding which fights still happen and which fights never start. Sometimes it looks like a gangster eating spaghetti over a man who came to kill him. Sometimes it looks like a mother who decides her son will not run errands for any man with a gun, no matter how hungry they are. Sometimes it looks like a tired man walking away from a crew he has known since childhood, choosing a boring, safe job over fast money. On the streets, real power is not the loudest move, it is the last word. That night at Alhambra, Bumpy does not just survive an assassin, he forces Dutch Schultz, one of the most feared mob bosses in New York, to fold his hand and walk away from Harlem. 200 people see a fight. The police file see a self-defense case. But history? History sees a king stay on his square while another king quietly leaves the board. Somewhere far from Harlem, in a quiet apartment on the south side of Chicago, a woman opens a letter. No jazz band, no clinking glasses, no spaghetti, just paper. Her hands shake as she reads the words. Her son, Ulysses Rollins, injured in New York. Severe trauma, loss of one eye, condition, uncertain. That is it. No mention of Alhambra, no mention of 200 witnesses, no mention of a man named Bumpy Johnson. To Harlem, Rollins is the bull, 6'2", 240 pounds, a hitman who killed 11 people before 25, a monster sent to make a statement. To her, he is the boy she once walked to school, the teenager she scolded for staying out late, the young man who promised more than once, "Ma, I got it under control. Harlem sees a weapon. Chicago sees a son. Maybe somewhere there is a wife. 2. A woman who irons his shirts before he catches the train, who knows he does work, but does not know the details. She tells herself the late nights are for them, for rent. For the baby asleep in the next room. Maybe there is a child who only knows him as Daddy. Daddy who brings candy. Daddy who lifts them up to touch the ceiling. When that letter arrives, none of them see 36 cuts. They just see a line that says injured and a hospital name they cannot pronounce. If the camera followed them instead of Bumpy, the story looks different. We would not start in Harlem with a plate of spaghetti. We would start in a kitchen lit by one weak bulb. We would start with a woman sitting at a table, letter in one hand, rosary or coffee cup in the other, trying to remember the last time her son smiled in a way that was not forced. To Harlem, he is the villain who walked into the wrong neighborhood. To them, he is proof that the world eats men like him and does not even bother to chew. And the story does not end at Alhambra. Weeks later, Rollins comes back. Maybe he is angrier. Maybe he is desperate. Maybe he is just trying to prove to himself he is still the bull. He finds Bumpy on the street. He raises a gun. He pulls the trigger. He misses. The bullet tears through the air and hits a woman who has nothing to do with Dutch, or Harlem's numbers, or any of it. Just a woman on her way home. A life that never signed up to be a footnote in somebody else's legend. In the Harlem version, this moment is just another line in the list of reasons why Bumpy had to finish the job. In the family version, this might be the first time Rollins realizes there is no way back. After that, he disappears. Some people in Harlem whisper that Bumpy had him taken care of quietly. No witnesses this time. No music to stop. Others swear they heard he limped back to Chicago, half blind, half broken, living like a ghost under a different name. In the legend, that mystery is exciting. It gives the story a hook. What do you think happened to Rollins? In real life, it could mean a mother who never gets a body to bury, a woman who never gets a clear answer, a child who grows up hearing only fragments, half-truths, and rumors. If we followed their footsteps with the same attention we give to Bumpy's tie and his spaghetti, would we still call him a hero, a protector of Harlem? Or would we just see two men, each soaked in other people's blood, grinding strangers and families into dust so their names sound bigger when someone tells the story? There is one person who sits between these two worlds, Helen Lawson. She sees Bumpy quote poetry in a jazz club. She sees Bumpy turn a restaurant into an operating table with no surgeon. She knows the smell of his cologne and the sound of a man screaming when his eye is taken. Years later, when people around her repeat the legend, she carries both versions in her head at the same time. The myth of the man who saved Harlem and the reality of the man who ruined lives to do it. Behind every legend, there is a family that never gets a name, and they do not remember spaghetti. They remember the letter. Years later, an old man in Harlem is asked what he remembers about that night at Alhambra. He does not talk about the screaming. He does not talk about the blood on the floor. He does not talk about a man losing his eye. He squints, thinks for a second, and says, "That was the night Bumpy Johnson sat down and ate spaghetti." That is how legends really work. The mind does not keep every punch, every cut, every second of panic. It keeps one crooked detail. A plate of spaghetti in the middle of a war zone. A man who has just carved another man open, calmly straightening his tie like he is on his way to church. 36 cuts made people freeze in fear. The spaghetti made them remember. And from that detail, the story grows. It travels from table to table, barbershop to barbershop, from fathers to sons, from mothers to daughters. Not as a court record, as a lesson. In Harlem, the lesson sounds like this. A real man doesn't just survive. He controls the room. Real power is when you don't have to raise your voice, even after 36 cuts. But step back and look wider. Real power is not only a gangster in a restaurant. It is not only a mob boss calling a hit or a king of Harlem telling Dutch Schultz, "We leave Harlem alone," without ever raising his tone. Real power also lives in smaller, quieter places. In a house where a parent decides, "The violence stops with me." In an office where somebody refuses to play dirty, even when everyone else does. In your own mind, when you choose not to throw a punch, not to send that text, not to humiliate someone just because you can. That is still control. That is still a message. It just leaves less blood behind. Because every world has its own Bumpy Johnson, someone who sets the rules without shouting, the boss everyone orbits around, the person whose approval or anger changes the temperature of the whole room. Where you live, who is that person? Is it the loudest one in the group, or the one who only speaks when it really matters? Is it the one who scares everyone, or the one people quietly trust? And in that story, what role are you actually playing? Are you the person who repeats the legend word for word without asking what it costs? Are you just another face in the crowd at Alhambra, watching the show and telling yourself it has nothing to do with you? Or are you the one who, in a small and boring way, changes the rules of your own corner of the world? Because legends are not only born in Harlem, they are born in the way you tell the stories of your life, your work, your family. Every time you choose which detail to keep and which to forget, you decide who looks powerful and who disappears. So, if it were you sitting in that restaurant, or hearing about it the next morning, who would Bumpy Johnson be in your eyes? Hero, villain, or both at the same time? Drop it in the comments. Is Bumpy, to you, a protector of his people, a monster with good PR, or something in between? And if this story made you feel something, if it made you think about the kind of power you respect in your own life, let it sit with you for a second, because this night at Alhambra is not the end of his story. There is a day coming when Bumpy Johnson walks into the office of Lucky Luciano himself. No knife, no screaming, just one black gangster from Harlem sitting at a table with the Italian mafia, turning spaghetti in a neighborhood restaurant into a seat at the table for all of Harlem. That is the story we are telling next.